Greetings, everybody. Hope you're well and safe. Welcome to an edition of User Delight with Microsoft Technology. My name is Sanjiv Venkatram, and suffice it to say that I'm a Microsoft technology enthusiast and a Microsoft Business Applications community member out here in Singapore. So what we're going to do today is to look at real-time storage scenarios. As an example, images coming in from a drone or 3D files in a mixed reality applications, and look at these scenarios in the context of an application. And in this case, it happens to be the fantastic Microsoft PowerApps ecosystem. So we'll actually connect the storage account to the PowerApps and look at that entire system as to how easy it is for us, the end users, to actually cobble this up. And the storage account we're actually going to use is part of Microsoft Azure. A plethora of services are available within Microsoft Azure, one of which happens to be a storage account. It's also called as Azure Data Lake Storage, or ADLS. Okay, it's a mouthful, but as you will see, it is very easy to understand, to provision, and to operate with. Okay, with this, let us actually get in. And by the way, if you're interested in connecting with me, here's a QR code that you can scan, and it gets you to my LinkedIn profile. So for us end users and for awareness, I do a lot of posts on LinkedIn. In fact, one every month. So it would be very kind to get connected, to share ideas, and to grow richer in knowledge. With this, let us actually get into the agenda here. So what we're going to do is, first of all, establish the need for this data lake storage in the PowerApps development ecosystem. So we'll look at two scenarios here, one with mixed reality in, let us say, the construction industry, and scenario two would be preventative maintenance in a cross-industry scenario. It could be construction, it could be manufacturing, or it could be, let us say, logistics. Okay. So once we have looked at the scenarios and the need for ADLS, we'll actually get nuts and bolts, right? So we'll get down to provisioning ADLS, configuring it, bringing in images from various different sources in real time. Then we'll actually connect this ADLS to PowerApps and to bring those 3D files over into and images into PowerApps. And once we have done that and established how easy it is, we'll actually look at security and governance. And incidentally, I presented this exact same thing in the Azure Bootcamp, and there were a couple of questions that came up, so we can actually look at those questions as well and close the talk. Okay. So with this, let me actually head on over to my LinkedIn. And I am going to, where is my LinkedIn? I'm going to go over here and then make this bigger and walk you through what this is. Okay. So as you see here, and if I play this, you see a little engine go back and forth in a diorama, a train diorama, if you will, which actually has a combination of the real engine on the tracks plus 3D models of a fire station, a water tank, a tree, a police station, so on and so forth, that completes the diorama in mixed reality, right? So this could be the case in the construction industry. Here it's a railway museum. The possibilities are endless here, right? So we'll actually see as to how we've been able to get these 3D models into PowerApps from the storage account, right? So that's one scenario. The other scenario basically revolves around preventative maintenance, and I'm going to go down here in my post to get there, and there it is. I'm going to make this bigger. And what this is as you can see, I'm flying a drone from my PowerApps, and then I'm flying it to my AC unit to capture, first of all, to look at the AC unit and the sensors within the AC unit to see if there's any dust coating or if there is something on the sensors that is a cause for concern before something actually happens, right? And if I do notice that it's dusty and hard to get by, let us say, I can then capture images from the drone, right? And we'll get into it later. So I can capture images from the drone, put it into my Azure Blob Store or the Azure storage account, the Data Lake Storage account, and from there bring it as I'm doing right now. I'm capturing it in the storage account. So from here, I actually bring it over to my application, and once I have the images resident in my application, I can send it over to a form, enter relevant details, and then make a process out of it. I'm just going to stop this here. So in this scenario, we are actually doing real-time streaming of images into and capturing that into Python actually, and capturing that from Python into my storage account and bringing it to an app and then forming a process around it. Okay, so we'll get into both these scenarios, and this, I assume, gives you an understanding as to why I have actually used the data lake to capture these images and 3D files in real time and form processes around it, right? With PowerApps that allows you to elegantly capture your ideas and then make a process out of it, okay? With this as a preamble, let's actually get into Azure. So if I go to azure.com and log in, I basically get into my Azure environment. And inside my Azure environment, I have what is called as a subscription. And with my subscription, essentially, I get access to a resource manager. So this is a default resource manager within my subscription that essentially allows me to create resources such as a storage account. So let's actually go ahead and do that. So I'm going to say create over here, and this goes away and allows me to select the resource that I want. In this case, a storage account. So I'm going to say create. And then once I click on this, it tells me, hey, look, you have your active subscription, you have your resource group. Now actually give the storage account a name. So I'm going to say ADLS media. I'm just going to say ADLS media, and I'm going to give my initial SSV, right? And I'm going to select the closest data center to me, which happens to be in Southeast Asia right here. I'm in Singapore, so I want something that is actually closest to me so as to avoid issues with latency, okay? So then I could basically say if I'm doing a small little application, I could say it's geo-redundant or locally redundant. But then if it is something that is a little bigger, I'll actually select geo-redundant. And if it's across the enterprise, across many different countries, then I could actually select zone redundant applications as well, right? Storage as well, okay? So then I'm actually going to go over to my advanced settings, and here I have a few key parameters to choose. Here it says enable storage account key. Now, if I want to securely store my images, I need an access key, right? So I'm going to actually click this as yes. And then down below here, it says enable a hierarchical namespace. Now, if you don't enable a hierarchical namespace, you will end up with what is called as a typical storage account without any hierarchy, right? What does that mean? If I were to go over to, and as you see in the storage account, there is the Uber storage account, and then there are containers. You can think of containers as folders, Uber folders, right? So if I were to go over to this folder that says drone pics over here, you will actually see that in addition to this Uber container, I actually have a folder, right? So I've said new folders, there's a test folder here and a bunch of blobs. Blobs are equivalent to images, right? Here, the issue is that I will not be able to secure this folder if it's a pure play storage account. However, if it is a data lake, as what we're actually configuring right now, if it's a data lake, and if I enable this hierarchical namespace, it then allows me to control access to those folders. Very, very important in the enterprise context, okay? So I'm going to check this as yes, and then I'm going to say review and create, and go ahead and create this storage account. So when you create the storage account from your online Azure interface portal, you will be able to download a thin client onto your desktop called as a Storage Explorer. The beautiful thing about the Storage Explorer is that it behaves much the same way as your Windows Explorer. If I bring up my Windows Explorer here, looks pretty much the same, doesn't it, right? So then I'll be able to work right from here instead of actually working online. Incidentally, you can also access this using PowerShell, which at scale makes it relatively simple. Okay, so let us actually wait a minute, and this says, the resource has been provisioned. Let's go to the resource over here. And then if I click on the storage browser here, it basically shows me exactly the same thing. The blob containers here, you see it shows me exactly the same thing that is here on my PC. If I refresh this and if I go to my Visual Studio subscription, you will actually see that this ADLS media has now been created, right? And then if I open up this blob container, you see the logs much the same way you see the logs online as well. So I'm going to go ahead over here and add a container. So I'm going to basically click on my storage account, actually go to my blob container, right mouse, and then say create a blob container. I'm going to call this 3D files, right? I'm going to call this 3D files. So there's nothing out here right now. The couple other things actually I need to do is to basically go to this 3D file and then set the access level to public so that right now we'll all be able to see the image that I put into this. Perhaps not so much the 3D files, you won't be able to view that without a special viewer, but at least the images you will be able to see. So enough talk, let's actually do this. I'm going to say public access to containers and blobs. I'm going to apply this. So this is one thing we need to do if it's a public access. If it is a private access, you don't need to do this so that outsiders won't be able to see. If they get hold of a URL to your image, they won't see anything, okay? We'll do that shortly and you'll know what I'm talking about. The second thing basically is if I were to go over to my storage account here and go to resource sharing, essentially there is what is called as cross-origin resource sharing. All it basically means is that if you have an application running in the web, it enables the web application that is running under one domain to access resources from another domain, right? That's about it. And in order to do this, you basically say, hey, wildcard and say across origins. And I'm going to actually get, images over here. So I'm going to use the get protocol and I'm going to leave the headers and the exposed headers blank. And now I'm going to save this, right? So this gives me the ability to actually view those images and view those 3D files across different domains. Okay, my PowerApps domain is actually different from my storage account domain. That's essentially what's going on here. Okay, so once I've set up my Storage Explorer, it is time for me to add a couple files here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over to my desktop and move this file over. So this Global Azure Bootcamp, an image for this, I'm going to move this over to my storage account. And if I right mouse on this, I actually get a URL. So I'm going to copy this URL. I'm going to go up here and then I'm literally going to paste this here. And if I paste this here, you literally see the image. Now, if I had disabled the public access and said no public access, if somebody were to get hold of this URL and go to the browser and hit enter, they won't be able to see anything. It's going to say, hey, look, there's an error or something of that sort. Okay. Likewise, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go over to my Windows Explorer and I'm going to go over to my BD. And let us say, where is my mixed reality here? I should have a mixed reality. And then I'm going to copy this lamp post, which is the GLB file. I'll walk you through how to get this. I'm going to copy this over to the storage account as well. So I'll have a regular image and I'll have a 3D file here. And as you see, it has basically copied using what is called as Azure copy, the command. And if you're doing this bulk and from PowerShell, you'd be able to use the Azure copy command to transfer the files over, right? In this case, I didn't because it's a drag and drop. I just have a few images to transfer here, okay? So now this is how I'm able to provision, configure, and load images and 3D files into my data lake, okay? Kindly note that the difference between this ADLS media and then this barcode is that one is a pure play storage account, whereas this one is a data lake, okay? And it does many things other than storing images. But if I were to right mouse on this, I will actually see access control list. And if I were to go online here and look at what this access control list is that it allows me to manage the data lake storage at many different levels. It allows me to manage it at the literally this blob level over here, where I can add the image level. Image is, a common, blob is a IT term for, let us say, an image, right? So I can actually have control access at this level. If I have a folder here, I can get access at the folder level, at the container level, and at the Uber container level as well. Whereas if I go here to my storage account, and if I were to go to one of the containers here, which has a folder, I don't get the same thing here. I don't get the access control list, right, ability. So the security here, because we said a name, a hierarchical namespace, allows for control at many different levels. And that's the beauty, that's the reason why you have an ADLS, a data lake, as opposed to a pure play storage account. Okay, awesome. So with this as a background, now that we have got these two images, I think we have got everything. Let us actually look at how we get these 3D files. The starting point for a 3D file is, let us say, a CAD system, a computer-aided design system. In this case, it's called SolidWorks. You could use CATIA, you could use Ideas, you could use Pro Engineer. I'm not terribly sure if that's called the same anymore. You could use Rhino, you could use many different 3D modelers. In this case, this is what engineers would actually use in manufacturing. Whereas if you use software such as Rhino, it is used mostly for gaming and so on and so forth. So from here, you can actually save this file as an STL file, right? So if you go over here, you can actually save it as an STL file. Once you save it as an STL file, which is a triangulated file, you will be able to open this in a 3D viewer, like how I have opened it, right? I've opened this water tank, which is a combination of those triangulated files, and then I'll be able to save this as a graphics file called GLB, right? If I say save as, I'll be able to save it as a GLB file over here, right? And this is what we can bring into our PowerApps, okay? So now that we have got our data lake done and stored an image and a 3D file there and walked through the process of how we have got the 3D file from the inception, let us actually head on over to our Power App. Right, so I'm going to go to my Power App here, and I'm going to go to the last screen, which has got nothing here other than the headers and identifying the user image and so on and so forth. Let us first connect to the data lake from here. Okay, so I'm going to go click on this container, and you see add data here. I'm actually going to do two things. If I say Azure Data Lake, there is a connector to Azure Data Lake. Now, I don't want this because I'm not looking for the tables or the queries or whatever that is in a data lake store. What I'm looking for is the storage account, so I can literally say, give me Azure Blob Store here, and there is a connector to the Azure Blob Store. So I'm going to click on this guy, and I'm going to say add a connection, right? Then I know my container is called, my storage account is called ADLS Media SV. I'm going to add that here, ADLS Media SV. Let us make sure ADLS Media SV. I'm not terribly good with spellings. And then what I'm going to do is right mouse on this, and I'm going to get that primary key. Okay, so I'm going to put this primary key here, which should allow me to connect to this blob store. So I'm going to say got it. And I'm not going to save the password. It is loading here, and lo and behold, I'm connected to my storage account. It is this simple. It is this ridiculously simple to connect your storage account within your data lake to your application. Now, kindly note that this is a premium connection, okay? So what does that mean? You actually need to have a PowerApps per user or per app license in order for you to use this in production, okay? So now I'm going to go over to my tree view, which shows me the evolution, if you will, of the application from a screen. And then there are all these controls that are there. Now I'm going to go ahead and insert what is called as a data table. Why am I doing this? I'm doing this to be able to access the folders or the containers within my Azure Data Store. So what do I mean by that? I want to be able to access my 3D file container first, right? So that is whatever is in this root folder, give me the list of whatever is there so that I can get the ID of this container. Once I get the ID of my container, then I'll be able to select the files inside of this container. So let's do that instead. So I've got my data table here. I'm going to move it up and then make it half screen, let us say. Actually, I'm going to just pull it down like so, okay? And then on the right hand side, I'm going to select my Azure Blob Store here, right? Once I select this, then I'll say it gives me a function to access the root folder within my storage account. So I'm going to say list root, right? Root folder version 2, and then I'm going to say not pass any parameters inside. I'm going to say give me the value of this, right? List root folders first, and then close this and then say give me the value, and lo and behold this goes away and then says this is a table. So I can edit the fields here and then say, you know what, I need the display name, I need the e tag, and I need the ID. Okay, I don't necessarily need the e tag, but I need the ID, right? So there you go, it's gone ahead and actually given me the ID that corresponds to the display name 3D files. Okay, once I have this, I'm actually going to insert another, right? I'm going to insert another data table here, and then I'm going to connect to the same Azure Blob Store, right? So like so, I've connected this. I'm going to move this to the right. I'm going to get this table, and then I'm going to make this smaller. I'm going to make this smaller, move it up. Perhaps I should have done this before. And I'm going to select this data table here. I'm going to move this down below like so, and make some space. There you go, right? Now, once I've already got the root here. In this case, I'm going to say list the folders that are there inside the container, right? So I'm going to say list folder version 2, right? And then it's asking me for the ID. Well, what ID do we have? The ID that corresponds to 3D files. So I'm going to say data table 1, data table 1, whoops, data table. See, I can't spell it, can I? So I'll say data table 1 that dot selected dot what do I want? I want this ID. So dot ID, right? I'm going to say data table 1 dot selected dot ID and give me the values corresponding, the value corresponding to that, right? So now if I go ahead here and then go to edit fields, I'm going to say give me the display name and give me the path to this. So if I say add, there you go. So it's actually given me the display name of the blobs, the image, as well as the 3D files, and it's actually given me the path to this, whatever is the path, right? So if I go ahead, you see this path. In fact, actually, this has a space, and I wish we could, let us see, rename this. Let us see if it allows us to rename this. Yes, it does. So I'm going to remove all these numbers from here. I'm just going to say Global Azure BC, okay, Bootcamp. I'm going to rename this guy. So this has been renamed. If I refresh this, yes. And then what I'm going to do here is that I'm going to re-add this, okay. I'm going to re-add this guy. I'm going to take this here, take this off, and then I'm going to re-add this. And lo and behold, the name change has been captured, right? So now what do? I am going to actually insert a label, right? I'm going to insert a label, and then in this label, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pass the path and the name of whatever it is I want to. So I'm going to actually say, well, first of all, if I were to look at the URL, I'm going to select this tenant here. So I'm going to select this guy, the HTTPS tenant. I'm going to go over here and I'm going to put that tenant value right there, right? So I got the tenant, and then I'm going to concatenate this with whatever is the path that is selected in the data table. I'm going to say data table 2 dot selected dot path, right? And there you go, I get my full path, right? Once I have my full path, all I need to do is now go insert an image here. So I'm going to put the image down below like so and like so. And I'm going to actually add, let us say, a 3D object, right? The mixed reality 3D object, I'm going to actually put this on the right hand side. So I've got the image on the left hand side and I've got the 3D file on the right hand side. And in the image, I'm just going to say label, whatever the label is, label 3, right? I'm going to say label 3 dot text. And lo and behold, I get my file. And in this case, I'm going to go here and I'm going to replace this in the data source. I'm going to replace this URL with label 3 dot, I'm going to say, I don't need the, so I'm going to say label 3 dot text. And here's what's going to happen. If I play this, if I select my 3D file, this should go away. It says cannot view content, label 3 dot text. Seems okay. Let me see. Oh, there is a, you see over here, there are two, what do you call this? I'm going to remove this, I'm going to remove the slash, and voila, you will actually see the 3D file, right? And if I click on this guy here, I'll be able to see the image. If I click on this one, which is a 3D file, I'll be able to see the 3D file, right? So that's how easy it is to get images and 3D files from your Azure data store. Let us do one more thing, right? If I'm running a drone, I typically control the drone from two places. I control it from PowerApps and Azure IoT Central and send the command over to a bunch of Python code, right? So instead of actually controlling the drone right now, it's a little late in the night, I have a Python code that actually gives me an image, right? When I run this Python code, I have OpenCV here, so it shows me an image in black and white of my own face actually. And if I were to press the S key here, I'll be able to save this to the Azure Blob Store. So let us see this as well. First of all, you need to basically get three libraries, right? One, basically, you import the blob itself, like the actual blob client. Then you have the client to the container, which is one level higher. You saw the containers, the 3D files was a container. And then the actual, the blob service, which is your Azure data store, is your blob service. Then the container, and then the blob itself, right? So you need these three libraries. Then you import OpenCV, and now you have this connection string, much the same way as you saw the connection string before. So it is basically saying the endpoint is HTTP protocol, the account name is, we will actually go here, the account name is what? ADLS Media SV. So let us actually change this. I'm gonna say here ADLS Media SV, there you go, right? And then the account key. So I'm gonna actually delete this entire thing like so, right? And I've deleted it, and I'm gonna go here and I'm gonna access the primary key, and I'm going to paste the primary key here like so, right? So now I have the connection string, and this is all good to go. Once I'm connected here and using these libraries and using the connection string, I've established the connection to the data lake. Now what I do is I basically capture in OpenCV, I open up a window called test, right? I say video capture, that allows me to start the video, and then I open up a window called test. And then kindly ignore this, I was actually trying to do something else here. But as I'm connected, while that is true, then I'm gonna actually read from the camera. So when I read from the camera, it gives me two variables, ret and frame. Ret basically is a binary variable, true or false, that basically says, do I have a frame or not, right? So when I have a frame, I convert it to grayscale, right? I think easier on storage. And then once I have that converted grayscale image, then I'm going to show this image, right? I'm going to show this, and I'm going to endlessly loop this. When I say wait key 1, it basically does, what it does is that it keeps streaming, right? And then what I do is, if I say the parameter here equals 27, it transposes it to me pressing the escape key. If I press the escape key over here, it stops the streaming. But if I actually say 32, then that is equivalent to pressing the space bar. Alternatively, I could use the ORD function within Python that would actually convert it to a Unicode, and then I could say ORD S, which would actually mean using the save key, right? But in this case, it's actually doing the space bar. It doesn't matter, right? And then I'm going to cycle through over here, and then as I keep like pressing the space bar, I can capture multiple images into my storage account, right? So the name of this is going to get updated from remote 0 to 1 to 2, so on and so forth. And then I'm going to actually write this. It says barcode pack, and barcode pack here is this one. So here I need 3D files, right, is the container name. So I'm going to remove this guy, and I'm going to say 3D files. Okay, so now I'm actually ready to do this. So if I run this, I should see my picture come up. So it's loading it, it's running the code, and I should be able to see the image pop up pretty soon. Let me see. There you go, the cameras come on, and we should be able to see, there is my image, right? There is my image. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to press the space bar here. So, and head on over to my storage account and refresh this, and there you go, this remote issue 0 has been captured, you see? And then given that this has actually been captured, I'm just going to say escape, and lo and behold, you know, the program's done, there is a break, and we are good to go, right? So that's a way by which you could run your drone using the Python code. You connect your drone, you access the camera. Instead of me accessing the camera here, you see where it's actually accessed the camera here and said video capture 0. It's the same exact thing. If I say stream on from my drone, it actually streams the image from my camera in the drone, and then the rest is, you know the rest, right? So the question here is, do I necessarily have to press the space bar here for me to take a picture? Absolutely not, right? You could automate this. You could basically scan a barcode, let us say, and then say if the barcode is right, the picture is captured, right? Many different ways of actually automating this one. Or from your, as you connect your Python code to Azure IoT Central, which is the platform between your Power App and the Python code, from your Azure IoT Central, through your Power App, you could press a button in your Power App, and then Azure IoT Central would send a command over here to take a picture, right? So the possibilities here, frankly, are endless as to what you can actually do, okay? All right, so this is yet another way by which you could access streaming data from, let us say, your drone or any camera, and put this into your storage account from there. And that's exactly what I had done in my drone, right? I was able to get the pictures from the drone into the data lake, and once I got it in the data lake, over to my application, and then from here you could add a form, you could do so many different things from here, okay? I trust this actually gives you an end-to-end perspective of the need for ADLS, and you saw a couple scenarios, and I trust you've gotten an idea of what you could do with this PowerApps ADLS combination. The second thing is, we were able to provision a data lake storage account. We were able to configure it, the core settings, the public access levels, and then potentially security as well at many different levels, be it either at the blob level or the container level or at the storage account level itself. Once you were able to do that, we were able to connect it to the PowerApps application. Kindly note that I connected to the storage component of the data lake and not to the data lake itself, because I didn't want any kind of table stores or data or whatever it is in ADLS. I just wanted the images and the 3D files, okay? So once we were able to get that, we listed the root folder to see what are the containers and what are the IDs of the container. From there, we added another table to get at exactly the ID of that container to see what is inside. And then we were able to get the URL of that in a label and use it either in a 3D file or let us say to get the image. Okay. One last thing, if you're playing with those 3D files, you could either use the CAD system or let us say a 3D modeler like Rhino or whatever, and then save the file as an STL file or a GLB file directly and then bring it over to your storage account. If you're doing this en masse, you could actually use PowerShell as well. I trust this gives you a 360-degree perspective of real-time streaming of images and then capture using PowerApps through the Data Lake Store to do whatever it is that you choose to do for your applications. With this, I say thank you very much for the opportunity and wish you all the very best, right? Wish you all the very best. If you have any questions, kindly do reach out. Also, incidentally, we have a community up here. If I were to go over to my LinkedIn, you will see that we have a community called User Delight with Microsoft Technology, right? It's called User Delight with Microsoft Technology. Kindly do join in. We have like-minded people here across the globe who are part of this, and we post our findings and share information every month. So I would warmly welcome you as well to this community. What I'm going to do with this video is that post it on LinkedIn as well as post it here on the User Delight community homepage. Okay? Thank you very much, folk, and here's wishing you all the very best. Cheers.